Good morning. Chapter 4 is called Christmas. So we know they've been getting snow and they're all warm and cozy in their log cabin, and Christmas has finally come. Christmas was coming. The little log cabin was almost buried in snow. Great drifts were banked against the walls and windows, and in the morning, when Pa opened the door, there was a wall of snow as high as Laura's head. Pa took the shovel and shoveled it away, and then he shoveled a path to the barn where the horses and cows were snug in their warm stalls. The days were clear and bright. Laura and Mary stood on chairs by the window and looked across the glittering snow at the glittering trees. Snow was piled all along their bare, dark branches, and it sparkled in the sunshine. Icicles hung from the eaves of the house to the snowbanks, great icicles large as the top of Laura's arm. They were like glass and full of sharp lights. Pa's breath hung in the air like smoke when he came along the path from the barn. He breathed it in, out in the clouds, and it froze in the white frost on his mustache and beard. When he came in, stamping the snow from his boots, and caught Laura up in a bear hug against his coat, his mustache and beard had little droplets of melted frost. Every night he was busy working on a large piece of board with two small pieces. He whittled them with his knife, and he rubbed them with sandpaper in the palm of his hand. And when Laura touched them, they felt as soft and smooth as silk. Then, with his sharp jackknife, he worked at them, cutting the edges of the large one into the little peaks and towers with the little star above. He cut little holes through the wood and cut the holes in shapes of windows and little stars and crescent moons and circles. All above them he carved tiny leaves and flowers and birds. One of the little boards he shaped in a lovely curve, and around its edges he carved leaves and flowers and stars. And through it he cut a crescent moon and curlicues. Around the edges of the small board, he carved a tiny flowering vine. He made the tiniest shavings, cutting very slowly and carefully, making whatever he thought would be pretty. Pa had made this for a Christmas present for Ma. He hung it carefully against the log wall between the windows, and Ma stood her china women in the shelf. The little china women had china bonnets on their head, and china curls hung against her china neck. Her china dress was lace across in the front, and she wore a pale pink china apron and little gilt china shoes. She was beautiful, standing on the shelf with flowers and leaves and birds and moons all carved around her, and a little star at the very top. Ma was busy all day cooking good things for Christmas. She baked salt rising bread and rye and Indian bread, Swedish crackers, and a huge pan of baked beans with salt pork and molasses. She baked vinegar pies and dried apple pies. She filled a big jar with cookies, and she let Laura and Mary lick the cake spoon. One morning, she boiled molasses and sugar together until they made a thick syrup, and Pa brought in 2 pans of clean white snow from the outdoors. Laura and Mary each had a pan, and Pa and Ma showed them how to pour the dark syrup into little streams into the snow. They made circles and curlicues and swiggly things, and then they hardened all at once into candy. Doesn't that sound like a cool idea? And how easy and fun. Laura and Mary might eat 1 piece each, but the rest was saved for Christmas Day. All of this was done because Aunt Elsa and Uncle Peter and the cousins, Peter and Alice and Ella, were coming to spend Christmas. The day before Christmas they came. Laura and Mary heard the gay ringing sleigh bells growing louder each moment. Then the big bobsled came out of the woods, and they drove up to the gate. Aunt Eliza and Uncle Peter and the cousins were in it, all covered up with blankets and robes and buffalo skin. They were wrapped up in so many coats and mufflers and veils and shawls that they looked like big, shapeless bundles. When they all came into the little house was full and running over. Susan the cat ran out and hid in the barn, but Jack leaped up in circles through the snow, barking as though he would never stop. Now, there were the cousins to play with. As soon as Aunt Eliza unwrapped them, Peter, Alice, and Ella, and Laura and Mary began to run and shout. At last, Aunt Eliza told them to be quiet. Then Alice said, "I'll tell you what to do. Let's make pictures." Alice said they must go outdoors to do it, and Ma thought it was too cold for Laura to play outdoors. But when she saw how disappointed Laura was, she said she might go after all for a little while. She put on Laura's coat and mittens and a warm cape with a hood and wrapped the muffler around her neck and let her go. Laura had never had so much fun. All morning she played outdoors in the snow with Alice, Ella, and Peter and Mary, making pictures. The way they did it was this. Each one by herself climbed up on a stump, and then all at once, holding their arms out wide, they fell off the stumps into soft, deep snow. They fell flat on their faces. Then they tried to get up without spoiling the marks they had made. When they fell, if they did it well, there was snow with 5 holes shaped almost exactly like 4 little girls' and boys' arms and legs and all. And they called them their pictures. They played so hard all day that when the night came, they were too excited to sleep. But they must sleep or Santa Claus would not come. So they hung their stockings by the fireplace and said their prayers and went to bed. And Alice, Ella, and Mary and Laura all in one big bed on the floor. And here's a picture of their snow pictures that they were making. I think we might call them something like snow angels. Peter had the trundle bed. Aunt Eliza and Uncle Peter were going to sleep in the big bed, and another bed was made in the attic floor for Pa and Ma. The buffalo robes and all the blankets that they had brought were enough to make covers for everybody. Pa and Ma and Aunt Eliza and Uncle Peter sat by the fire talking, and just as Laura was drifting off to sleep, she heard Uncle Peter say, "Eliza had a narrow squeak the other day when I was away at Lake City. You know Prince, the big dog of mine." Laura was wide awake now. She always liked to hear about dogs. She lay still as a mouse and looked at the firelight flickering on the log and listened as Uncle Peter told the story. "Well," Uncle Peter said, "early in the morning, Eliza started to the spring to get a pail of water, and Prince was following her. She got to the edge of the ravine where the path goes down to the spring, and all of a sudden, Prince set his teeth in the back of her skirt and pulled. You know what a big dog he is," Eliza scolded him. "But he wouldn't let go. He's so big and strong she couldn't get away from him. He kept barking and pulling till he tore a piece of her skirt." "It was my blueprint," Aunt Eliza told Ma. "Oh, my goodness. He tore a big piece right out of the back of it," Aunt Eliza said. "I was so mad I could have whipped him, but he growled at me." "Prince growled at you?" Pa said. "Yes," said Aunt Eliza. "And then he started on again toward the spring." Uncle Peter went on, "But Prince jumped in the path ahead of her and snarled at her. He paid no attention to her talking or her scolding. He just showed his teeth and snarled. And when she tried to get past him, he kept in front of her and snapped at her. That scared her." "I should think so," said Ma. "He was so savage. I thought he was going to bite me," said Aunt Eliza. "I believe he would have." "I've never heard of such a thing," said Ma. "What on earth did you do?" "I turned right around and I ran to the house where the children were and slammed the door," Aunt Eliza answered. "Of course, Prince was savage with strangers," said Uncle Peter, "but he was always kind to Eliza and the children, and I felt perfectly safe to leave him there with them." Eliza couldn't understand it at all. After he got into the house, he kept pacing around and growling, and every time she started to go to the door, he jumped at her and snarled. "Had he gone mad?" said Ma. "That's what I thought," said Aunt Eliza, "and I didn't know what to do. There I was, shut up in the house with the children and not daring to go out. And we didn't have any water. I couldn't even get any snow to melt. Every time I opened the door, so much as a crack, Prince acted like he would tear me to pieces." "How long did this go on?" said Pa. "All day till late in the afternoon," Aunt Eliza said, "and Peter had taken his gun or I would have shot him." Along late in the afternoon, Uncle Peter said he got quiet, and he lay down in front of the door. And Eliza thought he was asleep, and she made up her mind to try and slip past him and get to the spring for some water. So she opened the door very quietly, but of course he woke right up. When he saw she had the water pail in her hand, he got up and he walked ahead of her to the spring, just the same as usual. And there, all around the spring, in the snow, were the fresh tracks of a panther. The tracks were as big as my hand, said Aunt Eliza. Yes, said Uncle Peter. He was a big fella. His tracks were the biggest I have ever seen. He would have got Eliza for sure if Prince had let her go down to the spring. He had been lying up in the big oak over the spring, waiting for some animal to come there for water. Undoubtedly, he would have dropped down on her. Night was coming on when she saw the tracks, and she didn't waste any time getting back to the house with her pail of water. Prince followed close behind her, looking back into the ravine now and then. I took him into the house with me, Aunt Eliza said, and we all stayed till Peter came home. Did you get him, Pa? Asked Uncle Peter. No, Uncle Peter said. I took my gun and I hunted all around the place, but I couldn't find him. I saw some more of his tracks. He'd gone on up north, farther into the big woods. Alice and Ella and Mary were all wide awake now, and Laura put her head under the covers and whispered to Alice, My, weren't you scared? Alice whispered back that she was scared, but Ella was scared her, and Ella whispered that she wasn't either any such thing. Well, anyway, you must make more fuss about being thirsty, Alice whispered. They lay there whispering until Ma said, Charles, those children never will sleep unless you play for them. So Pa got his fiddle, and the room was filled with warm firelight and Ma's shadow and Aunt Eliza and Uncle Peter and the big quivering on the wall and the flickering firelight, and Pa's fiddle sang merrily to itself. It sang Monkey Musk, The Devil's Dream, Arkansas Traveler, and Laura went to sleep while Pa and the fiddle were both softly singing. In the morning, they all woke up, almost all at the same time, and they looked in their stockings, and something was there. Santa had been there. Alice and Ella and Laura in their red flannel nightgowns and Peter in his red flannel night shirt all ran shouting to see what he had brought. In each stocking there was a pair of red mittens, and there was a long flat stick of red and white striped peppermint candy, all beautifully notched along each side. They were all so happy they could hardly speak at first. They looked with shining eyes at those lovely Christmas presents, but Laura was the happiest of all. Laura got a rag doll. It was a beautiful doll. She had a face of white cloth and a black button eyes. Black pencil had made her eyebrows, and her cheeks and her mouth were red with ink made from pokeberries. Her hair was black yarn that had been knit and raveled so that it curled. She had little red flannel stockings and a little black cloth gaiters for shoes, and her dress was pretty pink and blue calico. She was so beautiful that Laura couldn't say a word. She just held her tight and forgot everything. She did not know that everyone was looking at her till Aunt Eliza said, Did you ever see such big eyes? The other girls were not jealous because Laura had mittens and candy and a doll, because Laura was the happiest girl except baby Carrie and Aunt Eliza's little baby Dolly. The babies were too small for dolls. They were so small they didn't even know about Santa Claus. They just put their fingers in their mouth and wiggled because of all the excitement. Laura sat down on the edge of the bed and held her doll. She loved her red mittens and she loved the candy, but she loved her doll best of all. She named her doll Charlotte. Then they all looked at each other's mittens and tried on their own, and Peter bit a big piece of his candy stick, but Alice and Ella and Mary and Laura licked theirs to make it last longer. Well, well, Uncle Peter said, isn't there even one stocking with nothing but a switch in it? My, have you all been such good children? But they didn't believe that Santa could really have given them nothing but a switch. That happened to some children, but it couldn't happen to them. It was so hard to be good all the time, every day for the whole year. You mustn't tease the children, Peter, Aunt Eliza said. Ma said, Laura, aren't you going to let the other girls hold your doll? She meant little girls must not be so selfish. So Laura let Mary take the beautiful doll, and then Alice held her a minute, and then Ella. They smoothed the pretty dress and admired the flannel stockings and the shoes and the curly hair. But Laura was glad when Charlotte was safe in her arms again. Pa and Uncle Peter each had a new pair of warm mittens knit with little squares of red and white. Ma and Aunt Eliza had made them. Aunt Eliza had brought Ma a large red apple stuck with cloves. How good it smelled, and it would not spoil, for so many cloves would keep it sound and sweet. Remember the oranges we made at Christmas with the cloves? Ma gave Aunt Eliza a little needle book she had made with bits of silk for covered and soft with white flannel leaves, into which to stick the needle. The flannel would keep the needles from rusting. They would all admire Ma's beautiful bracket, and Aunt Eliza and Peter had made one for her, of course, with different carvings. Santa had not given them anything at all. Santa Claus does not give grown people presents, but that was not because they had not been good. Pa and Ma were good. It's because they were grown up, and grown up people must give each other presents. Then all the presents must be laid away for a little while. Peter went out with Pa and Uncle Peter to do the chores, and Alice and Ella helped Aunt Eliza make the beds, and Laura and Mary set the table for Ma to get breakfast. For breakfast, there were pancakes, and Ma made pancakes, a pancake man for each one of the children. Ma called each one in turn to bring their plate. Each one could stand by the stove and watch while the spoonful of batter Ma put on the arms and the legs and the head. It was so exciting to watch her turn the whole little man over quickly and carefully on the hot griddle. When it was done, she put it smoking hot on the plate. Peter ate the head of the man right away, but Ella and the girls ate theirs slowly in little bits, first the arms and legs, and then the middle, saving the head for last. Today the weather was so cold that they could not go out and play outdoors. And they all sat on the floor together and looked at the pictures in the Bible and the pictures of all kinds of animals and birds in Pa's big green book. Laura kept Charlotte in her arms the whole time. Then there was the Christmas dinner. Alice and Ella and Peter and Mary did not say a word at table, for they knew that children were to be seen and not heard. But they did not need to ask for second helpings. Ma and Aunt Eliza kept their plates full and let them eat all the good things that they could hold. Christmas comes but once a year, said Aunt Eliza. Dinner will be early because Aunt Eliza and the cousins had a long way to go home. Best the horses can do, Uncle Peter said. We hardly make it home before dark. So as soon as they had eaten dinner, Uncle Peter and Pa put the horses to the sled. Ma and Aunt Eliza wrapped up the cousins, and they pulled the woolen stockings over woolen stockings and the shoes they were already wearing, and they put on mittens and coats and warm hoods and shawls and wrapped a muffler, and here they are getting all bundled up for their ride home, because the sleigh they were riding did not have a cover. They were out in the open. Ma slipped piping hot potatoes into their pockets to keep their fingers warm, and Aunt Eliza's flat irons were hot on the stove, ready to be put on by their feet in the sled. The blankets and quilts and the buffalo robes were warm too. So they all got into the big bobsled, cozy and warm, and Pa tucked in the last robe well in around them. Goodbye, goodbye, they called, and off they went, the horses trotting gaily and the sleigh bells ringing. In just a little while, the merry sound of the bells was gone, and Christmas was over. But what a happy Christmas it had been. So that's the end of chapter 4. Did you know that you can ask me questions and send comments after you watch the video? Also, I want to remind you, make it a good day or not. The choice is always up to you, and I hope it's a good one.